All right. Well, while we're doing that, I will welcome all of you to the True Crime Talks Club and my room show called Unsolved. We have a room
Can you
every
hear me?
other. Oh, yes, we can. We can. There you go. All right. Yeah, so welcome to Unsolved. We're in the True Crime Talks Club. Every other Wednesday, we talk about a different unsolved case. Tonight, we're talking about Lonnie Ray Rogers and her disappearance. And we have three special guests here on stage. First is Dana Pohl from True Crime PI. We also have Ashley Fujawa from Uncover.com and Allison Diker, who is Lonnie Ray Rogers' daughter. So just a little bit of background, and I'm sure that Dana will be able to fill us in a little bit more. But Lonnie Ray Rogers disappeared in 1981, and I'll let them go into like the circumstances around her disappearance and the investigation. But one of the things that we like to highlight here is Uncover.com, which is a site that you can go to. It's free, and they have a bunch of unsolved cases, disappearances, suspicious deaths, things like that. And it's all laid out and visualized for you. So they have a lot of different resources that you can use and the ability to submit tips. So work with them a little bit to make sure these cases get some attention. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the ladies and Allison to kind of tell the story and give us some more details. So take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Dana Pohl, and I'm the creator and the host of True Crime PI podcast. Just a little business I'd like to share with you. Will be releasing the first episode of season 2, which is the disappearance of Sandra K. Powell on Wednesday, October 27th. And then later in the season, I'm going to be releasing a series of episodes on this case, the disappearance of Lonene Ray Rogers. So if you haven't, please subscribe to True Crime PI, which is available on your favorite podcast player. So to begin tonight, I want to give you a little bit of the case background. And this is basically a quick snippet from the podcast episode that will air in the coming months. Lonnie Ray Raffle was born on October 18, 1951 in Youngstown, Ohio. The Raffles were thrilled to welcome their first child, a little pink bundle of joy named after her grandfather, Lonnie. Although Lonnie looked healthy and happy, the Raffles soon discovered that she had been born deaf. According to her sister Glennie, Lonnie was a happy, upbeat person who loved people, music, and dancing. The Beatles were her favorite band. She thought Paul McCartney was dreamy, and she fell in love with Tom Jones after she went to see him in concert. Lonnie loved to dance, especially with her father. She could feel the vibrations, and she never missed a beat. With the help of her family, Lonnie grew into a confident young woman, never allowing her deafness to get in her way. After graduation, Lonnie's family moved to Meadville, Pennsylvania, and she enrolled in classes at Edinburgh State College. Her goal was to become a teacher for the deaf. Not long after, Lonnie met a man named Clinton Randall Rogers, Bud for short. Bud was also hearing impaired, but he was not born deaf. He lost his hearing from injuries he sustained when his family was involved in a car accident. On Saturday, October 21st, 1972, after a short courtship, Lonnie Raffle married Bud Rogers at the Little Corners United Methodist Church in Sagertown, PA. On January 12, 1975, Lonnie gave birth to a baby girl she named Allison. 2.5 years later, Lonnie completed her family with the birth of her son, Aaron. Lonnie loved motherhood. Her children were her world. But Bud was not the husband she had hoped he would be. According to those close to the couple, Bud was short-tempered, quick to anger, and he would react without thinking. On more than one occasion, these characteristics had gotten him into trouble with the law. After they married, Bud continued to commit criminal acts like breaking and entering, burglarizing vehicles and homes and garages. Lonnie was embarrassed and soon began to question the marriage. In October of 1980, Lonnie asked Bud to leave their home. She could no longer tolerate his lies, and she wanted more for herself and her children. Bud reluctantly agreed and moved in with his parents, who lived in a nearby community. But as Christmas drew near, Lonnie began to feel bad and agreed to allow Bud to return home and spend the holidays with the children. But she made it clear that he would need to leave when Christmas was over. New Year's Day came and went, but Bud stayed. 6 days later, Lonnie Ray Rogers disappeared. According to Bud, the last time he saw Lonnie was at approximately 12:45 a.m. on Wednesday, January 7th. He told police the couple had argued. After the argument, he went to sleep. At 2 a.m., he awoke and discovered that Lonnie was not next to him. He initially assumed that she had gone to sleep on the couch. He went to check and found that she was gone. He immediately woke 5-year-old Allison and 3-year-old Eric, dressed, gathered their things, loaded them into the truck, and drove them to the babysitter's house. At 3 a.m. in the middle of a blizzard, he told the babysitter that Lonnie left him for another man and that he was going to look for her. 3 hours later, Bud clocked in for his shift at Teledyne Penn Union. That morning, the babysitter called Lonnie's father and told him what happened. He hung up the phone and sped to the couple's duplex. When Lonnie did not answer the door, he kicked it down and ran up the stairs. His daughter was nowhere to be found. As he looked around the home, he noticed that everything was tidy and the beds were neatly made. When he spotted Lonnie's hearing aids, purse, and keys on the table, he knew something was terribly wrong. He immediately contacted the police to report her missing. The Raffle family has never believed that Lonnie would willingly leave her children. They are convinced that she was the victim of foul play. According to law enforcement, Bud fully cooperated with the initial investigation and has never been named a suspect. It is worth noting that the initial interviews with Bud were conducted without the aid of an interpreter. Over the years, police have requested to speak with Bud about Lonnie's disappearance, but he has refused or ignored these requests. On July 30th, 2021, 40 years after Lonnie's disappearance, in an interview with Erie News Now, Pennsylvania State Police investigator Nicole Ludwig publicly named Clinton Randall Rogers a person of interest. She also said, quote, "What that means is we can't force him to talk to us for this investigation. He's been reached out to several times. He's denied or has not gotten back to us regarding this," unquote. In the same interview, Lonnie's daughter Allison said, "I believe my father is responsible, and I believe that people know something that might help to convict him." Allison strongly believes that members of the deaf community may have the information needed to unravel this mystery. So tonight, I am honored to welcome Lonnie's daughter, Allison Diker, to Clubhouse. After 40 years, Allison kickstarted the investigation into her mother's case by demanding answers, requesting her father's arrest records, conducting searches with her own resources, and creating the Justice for Lonnie Facebook page. This page has grown into a community Allison calls Lonnie's Angels. So Allison, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the work you've been doing to bring your mother home?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I felt as if let me back up and say that I decided I wanted to write a book, and I wanted the book to honor my mother and to talk about her resilience, being a deaf child in a hearing world, and how she navigated around all the way up through, being a older sister and kind of the caretaker of her younger sisters, with a father who had a drinking problem. So she often kind of tried to make men's and protect her sisters, up through a troubled marriage and choosing a man that she hoped she could change, and that did not happen. So with that, I decided that I should make an appointment with the police to find out what information they would like to share with me regarding the case, because as you said, she's been a missing person now for 40 years. And in 40 years, there has not been one single significant lead. Every now and then there's a phone call, and because they can't share information, they'll say, "Do you know anyone by the name of Sandy?" And I'll say no, and then they say, "Thank you very much," and that's the end of that. Or, "Did you own a brown leather jacket?" Just random questions that I could never quite figure out why they were asking me or what the question led to. So at that point, I had said, please don't call me and ask me ridiculous questions unless you have something substantial for me. So I had not actually spoken to the police or anyone on the police force regarding the case in 11 years before I had gone in April. So when I went in April, I discovered pretty much that there hadn't been anything done. They hadn't, the case had gone from investigator to investigator, but no one had really actually done anything. It just was under different people's control, meaning they were responsible for that case. But there wasn't a whole lot in there that they had done. So I think the catalyst for me was when the police continued to say that he refused to speak to them. But when I went in April, the investigator had said to me that 5 years ago, they approached him just on an anniversary date, I think, of the disappearance, and asked if he would be willing to speak to them, and he agreed. So there, 5 years ago, he agrees to talk to them, and then I asked what happened, and the investigator said that the interview never happened because he's deaf, and they couldn't get a court-appointed interpreter to be part of the interview, which floored me. So at that point, I kind of started to put together that there was really very little they had done. Now, there are some significant things earlier on that they had tried. They dug up a well, nothing was found, but nothing in the last 20 years at least, if not more. So I, as Dana said, started a Facebook page. I've been reaching out to every crime show, podcast, anything I can do to bring awareness to this case. I do hope to publish this book very soon. My goal is January 7th, but we'll see how that works out. But very soon that will come out. And again, Dana is one of the podcasters I've been working with, just trying to get that out. I'm proud to say that when I started the Justice for Lonnie page, it's just a Facebook page, but within 3 months, I had 1,300 plus members. And these are all people that are just community people, interest people, people willing to share ideas, resources. There was one tip that came in, and I asked the police to bring cadaver dogs to investigate the area based on the tip, and they refused. So through the Justice for Lonnie page, I connected with a canine handler and had that search completed. It did turn up some things that is incomplete at this time, but I was excited for that connection and being able to reach out to the community to ask for help for things that I just don't have access to. And that's kind of where I am now, just continuing to tell the story, get the word out, whether it's someone that has an idea of something I could do or a resource that I could use. or a platform that I can share, I pretty much am spending whatever time I can trying to get the word out about this beautiful woman and a life that was ended way too soon.
Wow. I'm sorry. That took me a second. Thank you, Allison and Dana, for kind of going over the basics of this case. Um, it's very strange to me when the police say someone is not cooperating, but then you find out that they were, but the police kind of weren't cooperating. That is, I don't know if it's unwillingness to help or just not having enough knowledge to understand what's going on. The issue with the interpreter seems like something that could be resolved easily. Um, so I would encourage everybody to go to this Facebook page for sure, and just look at everything. I do have a couple of questions about, like, you said that there has been nothing, no movement in the 40 years that she went missing. So do you think that they were calling you because they may have had a lead, or some kind of hint or clue that they were trying to follow up on and just didn't follow up on? Why were they calling you with these vague questions, do you think?
I That's a good question. I mean, I wonder if somebody took another look at the case. It was very random, and they would be random questions. And then, of course, my mind would be racing, like, why are they asking me this? What does it connect to? Why don't I know this name? Why are they asking me about, this color shirt? Or it was really, there were several times that happened, but they would never tell me more than that. And they'll say, we'll get back to you if we have any more information. Well, you didn't give me any information to begin with. So, um, and as I said, I finally said I did give my DNA and had that filed. And at that time is when I said, please don't call me with, random questions unless you have something significant to share to me. And all I can think is that my aunt, my mother's sister, constantly called and, asked, what are you doing? What is going on now? Why haven't you interviewed him? Why, I was busy just trying to live my life and get to where I am today as a mentally healthy person. So I really didn't do a whole lot of anything with the case until now. But I do wonder if they just wanted me to know that they were looking at it, so they would ask a random question. I don't. I wish I had an answer to that, but I don't.
Yeah. And you said her sister reached out quite frequently. Um, did I guess she didn't have anything, that she thought may have happened. My biggest question is, what is your theory about what happened, and what was the family's theory on both sides, her side and his side, about what may have happened there?
So with um, my father's side, my father claims that she ran away with another man. Now there is talk of a man that she befriended at the hotel that she worked at, and honestly, I don't know the nature of their relationship. I do know that he was a married man and just really took a liking to her. They had often gone to a bar together and chatted. And what I've learned from my aunt was that, he was trying to help her get out of a bad marriage and probably just being an ear. I think she really cared for him and he really cared for her. But as far as the nature of the relationship, I don't really know. But his side, my father's side, claimed that she ran away. Not him. He was cleared and he didn't disappear. and remained with his wife for years thereafter. But his side claimed that she ran away with a man. My mother's side claimed, of course, that my father did something to cause her disappearance. What I have believed as a child, I wasn't really sure because I grew up with my father, unfortunately, in and out of foster care. He would decide to be a father and then didn't want to be a father, or children's services would come in and take us. I had a younger brother, would take us away because he was being abusive or neglectful. And that was an ongoing thing. We never were with him more than, I'd say, a year at most before we were taken away or given away by him. I had firsthand experienced abuse from him. Several people, when I started this justice page, several people would send me private messages telling me, about various aggressive connections to him, that, he assaulted them or he threatened them or things such as that. I did go to the Deaf Club, which is where they met, and it's kind of like a community for deaf people. And I spoke there and said, I'm Lonnie Ray's daughter, and I've grown up, and now I'm looking for her. And, they were all very sympathetic. Several of them messaged me afterwards about various things with my father, that they've always been afraid of him. They don't want to upset him, different things like that. And I said, now is the time. I beg you to come forward, and, your name won't be used or needed. I just beg you to come forward so we can find her and bring him to justice. And I do believe in my heart that this whole movement is, for the first time, really moving towards finding her. I feel like we're getting closer and closer, but there's just more dots to connect. And one thing I wanted to say that Dana didn't say that is pretty telling is that just before he married my mother, and I suspect before they even met, he actually committed a felony rape and was in jail. So I don't believe my mother ever knew that, but I share that only to express the nature of his violence and violent behavior, because him, staging robberies and burglaries and all of that was an abuse of his children, his wife. Those are all parts of his character and this story.
Thank you for that. I'm going to reset the room quickly so that we can make sure everybody knows where to come for more rooms like this. This is the True Crime Talks Club. This room, Unsolved, happens every other Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Tonight we're talking to Allison Diker, the daughter of Lonene Rogers, and True Crime PI Dana Pohl, and Uncovered's Ashley Fujawa. We do have open membership. We have about 23,000 members in the True Crime Talks Club. It is the biggest true crime club on Clubhouse, so we would love it if you wanted to become a member. And also if you want to host a room. We have a Discord channel, Instagram page. So if you just look up True Crime Talks on any of those platforms, you can find more information about that. But I wanted to move on to Ashley to see if she can give us a little bit of information about what's on the website and how people can get involved and help. And then we'll take questions a little bit later. So Ashley, give us a little insight on what's out there and how we can get involved.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you so much, Allison, for sharing your story and sharing your mom's case with us tonight, but also allowing us at Uncovered to be able to visualize your mom's case. You are an amazing advocate, and we know that there are so many other family members out there who are advocates for their loved ones' cases. So at Uncovered, what we're hoping to do is build a platform of all the missing and murdered cases that are unsolved. And those are cold cases are what we focus on, so cases that are at least 36 months or older, because we feel like that is the area where there's not a lot of maybe movement from law enforcement, and media has stopped covering for the most part. So we want to become a resource for family members, but also for the true crime community, where they are so interested in content and consuming a lot that we want to give people an opportunity to take that consumption and turn it into advocacy. So part of that is building a fully visualized database of all of these cases, which is now totaling over 250,000 unsolved cases, with a clearance rate of less than 50% for cold cases. So we know that this is needed. But we also know that there's a huge community of people who are interested in this content. So an opportunity to bring people in to our site, to show them a case. And actually, if you go to the link in my Instagram bio, which if you go to my profile here in Clubhouse, you can get to that for Uncovered. You can follow along for Lonnie's case tonight to see where we visualized. So what that looks like for us is a victim first profile, so you can get to know who the person was, photos, a really detailed timeline that's overlaid with a map, and then sources. So we know that people want to come and learn more, so we want to give them an opportunity to follow along with any media sources, any publicly available records that are out there, or any other content creators who have covered these cases, so people can get a bigger picture. But then we also have on our site called What's Left to be Uncovered. And this is an opportunity for people to not just to come and learn more, but actually do something when they're here. So particularly for Lonnie's case, you can follow along on TikTok, and then you can follow along on that Justice for Lonene page that Allison has created, and get to know her story that she's covering for her mother, but also you can contribute to the GoFundMe that it's up there. And then as we start to build out the timeline even more, that's an opportunity for people to crowdsource more information, to say, hey, there seems to be a gap in this timeline, or here's a record that I was able to find. So utilizing that power of collective impact, we're hoping to find answers for family members, but also to keep victims front and center in these cases. So that's a little bit about the platform that we're creating at Uncovered and how you can be part of that. And then also that community that exists. So we know that those are in different places. They're in Facebook, they're in Clubhouse, they're all over the place. But what we're building at Uncovered is an opportunity for people to have access to resources. So when you come in, you not only see all of these unsolved cold cases, but additional resources can be anything from our citizen detective guide to tips of how to organize data to our public records boot camp. And we're always curating more and more resources for a digital volunteer or a citizen detective to come in and utilize their skills. Another opportunity is cases that tend to fall off the internet. And we know particularly those cold cases that tend to be 40, 50, even 60 years old don't have a digital footprint because nothing has been covered. They didn't have a Facebook page. They weren't really active, at least online, in order to keep that information out there. So we're able to curate that for family members, and we're also able to curate that for the public. So if there's information that exists out there that maybe tends to fall off, that maybe it was an old newspaper clipping or a website that's not around anymore, we're archiving that information. So you have an opportunity to come in and interact with that info and provide more information. You can flag an event, you can submit a case, you can submit details, and be part of what we're building at Uncovered.
Thank you so much for that. And it's very important work that you guys do, which is why I really like to have you on as much as I can in the club and on Clubhouse, just to make sure that people understand that this one database that people always talk about as the dream, and even law enforcement will say, there's not one place for everything, is actually becoming a reality. And there's so much good information on the site. And even just the timeline, I'm looking at the timeline and thinking, okay, he woke up and he said she wasn't next to him. And then he, went to look for her at 3 a.m., but then he went to work. It's those things are important because it kind of shows a little bit of the behavior, along with some of the background information that you guys provided and that Allison provided, just about what kind of person we're looking at, what kind of person we're dealing with. And that's really important. Mm-hmm. Understand when maybe someone was around, maybe someone that worked with him or someone that worked with her kind of looks back and remembers that was unusual, or that doesn't seem right. They can hopefully maybe, submit a tip, or I understand that because it's 40 years old, there are probably a lot of people who have passed since then, may have had the information. But that doesn't mean that there's not a way to get it. There's always somebody who probably saw or heard something that they thought was unusual. But Allison, and I do appreciate you coming and sharing your story. It's incredibly brave, and I know it's something that's very close with you. Is your brother involved, or has he, not been involved? What's the status there? Because I wonder if I know he was younger than you, but if he remembered anything or thought anything was odd. I know there was a lot of abuse in the home, and both of you weren't there very often, but what are his thoughts?
So he and I couldn't possibly be more opposite. He's very quiet, very reserved, doesn't like to be in the limelight, really doesn't want his name front and center. So he and I have talked through Facebook. He lives in Florida, so we're not near each other, but we check in with each other, or I share information from time to time. I'll ask him questions. He lived with my father way longer than I did. At age 14, it was my brother's birthday, and we were all, my father had a pickup truck, and he had us all get into the pickup truck that didn't have, at that time, the cabs weren't real popular. It was just like the single seat bench seating up front. And my father invited his girlfriend to come, so he told me I had to sit in the truck bed. Now, in Erie, weather is very harsh in the winter, and October is just the beginning of that, so it was very, very cold. And once we started going, I was banging on the back window, begging to come inside because I was so cold. I swear I felt like my tears were freezing to my cheeks. And this was for my brother's birthday dinner, and he pulled into the police station, the Erie police station. Now he's deaf. He walked in and came back out, motioned to me kind of with his finger to come here. So I went in, and he said to the police, "I don't want her anymore. I'm bringing her and dropping her off. She's too much trouble." And the police couldn't understand him. So they said, "What is he saying? We don't understand. Can you interpret for us?" So I tell the police what he said. And the police officer says, "Can you tell him that you can't do that?" So now I'm interpreting from the police officer to my father, saying, he's saying you're not allowed to do that. You can't just drop me off here. The police officer tells me to tell him that he can have help arranged. My father refuses. The police officer then tells me, or asks me if there's anyone I know of that I could stay with until, because this was a Friday night. So is there anyone over the weekend I could stay with? Any family members, anyone I could call? And I said, no, not really. My aunt, who is my father's sister, was someone who took care of us off and on whenever we had been removed from the home. So I said, you could call her, because that's usually where we go. They called her, and she said, no, tell them to work it out. I'm done. So then the police officer came back to me and said, anybody else? And that particular day, my guidance counselor had called me into her office and, asked how things were. But, I gave the typical, fine, I'm good, I'm fine. So she wrote her home phone number down on a piece of paper and gave it to me and said, day or night, I don't care when, you need me, you call. And I said, okay. So that day she had given me that. So it was still in my pocket. When the police officer said, is there anybody else you could call? I out of nerves, had my hands in my pocket and felt the paper. And I said, oh, well, you can call her. She said if I needed anything to call her, and I couldn't be in more need than I am now. So, he, you know, uh, took the number and said, all right, I'll give her a call. And she came and picked me up, and that was history. They adopted me, and that was that. Now, I share that story because my brother did not leave. So my brother was with him off and on until I believe 16 or 17. But it was the same for him up until that point. And I believe he was just living with friends at that point. He experienced a lot more abuse than I did, physical abuse, because he was there longer and grew up a little more with him. I went to a family who was loving and encouraging and always wanted me, to be my best. And I thankfully was able to grow and be someone different. But he didn't have that. And so he's not real vocal, but very interested and very afraid of my father.
That's incredible that your teacher, the coincidence of events, I guess, had just given you her number that day. That's incredible, and I'm very glad she did. Wow, I'm a little I was a little shocked whenever you said that. Dana, I saw you unmute. Did you have something to add?
I was just going to say the same thing. Every time she tells this story, which I've heard it because we've talked many times about the case, it just, it kind of gives you the goosebumps. It's just an amazing, happening. And Allison and I will talk about these little happenings that keep happening as she's moving forward with the case. And, we always go back to, we like to think that Lonene is involved somehow in these things that happen that are positive or moving the case forward. And so getting her out of the home, the kindness of her guidance counselor, the very day that she needed that number, it just, it really kind of takes your breath away whenever you think about it. And the other thing I wanted to say is I did speak with Aaron. Aaron agreed to do an interview with me. So we talked. He is very different than Allison. Allison is a ball of energy, and Aaron is very calm. But he was able to, give me his perspective on what it was like. And I will be including that information in the podcast.
That's awesome. I am going to open it up for questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring you up. But I'm also going to throw it to Ashley to give us a little insight on other cases that are on uncovered.com, possibly that we could cover here in the few months that we have left in the year.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. As I mentioned, the database that we're building with Uncovered, we have visualized over 100 cases so far. And as I mentioned, there is a huge number of 250,000 that are out there. So our goal is to be able to give all of these cases the attention that they need. But at the moment, we have over 100 visualized with the help of our research team and amazing citizen detectives in our community, like Dana, who is in our community. And shout out to Dana and her amazing skills and what she's been able to do for cases that we have and for family members as well. But if you go to our site right now and you go to our map, and an opportunity that we see as well is to be able to introduce people to cases that they haven't heard about. So at the top of this show, Jennifer mentioned, we're bringing her cases that she hasn't heard about. And I mentioned that there are hundreds of thousands that are out there. We see that is a huge opportunity for people who are interested in this space to not only to know these stories, to share these stories, to get information out there, to look for, more information that could help break a lead in one of these cases. And that is anything from, the location of a case to a certain type of area, or if someone the same year that someone might have gone missing. So, for instance, with the case that we're talking about tonight, that was 1981. And if you go, we have 4 other cases that an incident took place in 1981, from a little baby that went missing in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Giovanna Crawford. So she was very small, and she went missing when her mother was at work. So that's another case that's out there, that there's just a few grainy photos of her because she was just a small child when she went missing. To Kurt Sova, who had a very suspicious death in Ohio, and his family member, particularly his brother, is still out there trying to figure out what happened to him that night. He was with some friends. He ended up disappearing for a few days, and his body was found. And then Lonnie's case that we're talking about tonight. And then there's also a case from New York. So Janice Fulham, she disappeared in New York when she was on her way to meet her brother. And that's one of the oldest cases that's out of New York. So those are just 4 right there from 1981 that we have had the time and the capacity to visualize right now. Like I said, we're working to do that a lot more. And with the community's help, we can give all of these cases the attention that they need. But there's also an opportunity to introduce people to cases that they wouldn't hear about, because it's the cases that don't get headlines, that don't get attention from the media, the community, or the justice system. So those are cases of Black and brown people, Indigenous women, people whose cases aren't heard about or aren't covered on local media, or tend to fall off, and they're not covered unless it's unfortunately an anniversary of another year passing without any information. So as much as we can keep these cases in front of people, introduce people to, hey, if you're interested in this, here's something that is similar. Can you utilize your skills to find more information? Or share with your own network and use your own agency to keep these stories in front of people. So it's not the same 5 cases that people tend to hear about or get coverage of, that there are so many cases that need attention and need answers. So I wanted to highlight that. And that is another thing that we see is a huge opportunity with what we're building in that notion of collective impact, is introducing people to more victims that are out there that need help and aren't just part of that large number, but they're individuals too, and their family is still searching for answers.
Exactly. And I will tell you, the first thing I did when I learned about uncovered.com, and probably the same thing that a lot of people have done, is go directly to cold cases and look up the state that I live in to see if there's anything out there that I may be able to help with. You know, and I think we've talked about this before. People get interested in cases when they are close to you geographically, you know, or if you're close in age to someone and you can relate to that. You know, this one in particular is in the deaf community. So there may be people who could help that way, you know. So when you're thinking about, oh, well, what could I possibly add, you know, if you go, you can see all of these details. And, you know, some of these timelines are built out really, really significantly, and see exactly, you know, where these people were seen on the map. So that, I think that would be the best introduction, is just go on the site and look at the state where you live, and see if there's any case there that's in your hometown or in the town that you work in, to see if that's helpful, or if you can, you know, dig into that one a little bit. I will say Dr. Page came up. Hi, Dr. Page Williams. She's always in our rooms and always very helpful and has questions. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. And I want to thank you so much for bringing this case to our attention. And Allison, it's just heartbreaking to hear what you've had to endure with, you know, with your mom being missing and not knowing where she is. But, and you may have addressed this, I had to step away for a minute, but has anyone looked into whether there were any other murders or any other disappearances that were happening around the time that she went missing?
Not that I know of. The police don't share with me what they do. So whether they did or not, I couldn't answer. But I've never heard any discussion of that.
Yeah, because I was just curious and I know most of what you presented really has made, you know, some really strong points about, your father being the suspect or whatever. But I was just curious about that because, sometimes we can get, honed in on one person and kind of miss, other things that may be out there. So I was just curious, and I appreciate you answering my question.
I would think that maybe I would have heard some, rumors or something. I don't know of anyone else in the area around that time frame. That doesn't mean there wasn't, but I've never heard any discussion of it. So it's a small rural area, and something like this is big news, and I've never heard anything.
Thank you, Paige. That's an interesting take, though, because we've seen in the past, different things happen in the same area, maybe a year or two apart, and there's a connection there. So that's a very good point, very good question. I don't have any more hands raised, so we'll go ahead and start wrapping up. What I will say is, number one, everyone should go to uncover.com, check it out, just dig into it. Number two, I would encourage you to go to the Facebook page that Allison created for her mother, and share the story. Share the stories you find on uncover.com, because it doesn't take that long to retweet or add something to your timeline on Instagram, and you just don't know who's going to see it. And after 40 years, maybe it's that one thing that lights a fire under the police department to say, oh, this is a good lead. This is something we should follow up on. I will ask you guys to have any closing comments. So I'll start with Dana first.
So I just wanted to throw out there that, ever since Allison has been putting the pressure on the police department, there has been a lot of movement. We have had media coverage because Allison has been pushing for that media coverage. We have had, she's had conversations with the police and a state police investigator. She talked a little bit about the canine handler, and there has actually been, the state police have gotten involved in that a little bit. And so I'd like to see if Allison might be able to clarify that so that we have kind of a good understanding of what has and is being done and where her hope lies right now. So it is no longer gathering dust is what I believe. And it's all because of Allison's advocacy. And I just, commend her for that. And I love for her to be able to celebrate that every chance she gets. So, Allison.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate that. Yes, my word is relentless. And at this point, that is where I'm at. As I already mentioned, there was a canine search. At the time that the canine search was done, the dogs did indicate a certain spot, and that is what we had a whole forensic team come out and investigate that area. The handlers also said, now I will say that the exact area where the dogs indicated, she was not found. However, it's a very large wooded area, and I'm not convinced that she's still not there. The handlers did say that after 40 years, unfortunately, her body could be part of the root system of the trees, and maybe that's what the dog smelled. So it could just be the beginning. And I am not willing to let that go until it has completely been investigated. I pretty much go back to Erie every weekend, every other weekend. There was a pretty intensive search last weekend with metal detectors, and I had 6 gentlemen on that search where we have gridded the area and where it's gridded into 4 areas, and we're using metal detectors, and the dogs will be coming back in November. According to the handlers, the ferns really mess with the dog's smell. So if there were other areas, they may have missed it because it was very overgrown with ferns in the summer when they were there. So in the beginning of November, they will be coming back out to do another search. So I'm hoping the combination of the grid search that we're doing now and the dogs coming back might turn up more information or different leads. So this is by no means the end. I feel a lot of positive energy with this case, and people keep talking and sharing, and I am very confident that we are getting somewhere. And I also, as I said, am writing a book. The book is called A Daughter's Journey, The Story of Resilience. And so the beginning of that book I mentioned was about my mother and her life. But the second half of that book is about my life and how her resilience was instilled in me, and I'm living that now, and I'm using that same resilience that was a gift from her to me to find her. So it's kind of a beautiful circle. Thank you, Dana.
Yeah, that is definitely something very touching from a daughter who lost a mother. I applaud you for just taking the time to write the book and share your story. And I've all of these efforts, should I hope they lead somewhere to at least get some information on what happened. I did bring Rachel up from uncovered.com. Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Hi there. I'm just going to usurp the last few minutes here to talk to the listener's question from the audience and say that we are building, as Ashley mentioned, this database. And of course, we're building the information within one case, but then also across cases so that we can do things like look to see if there were any other crime activities, whether it was homicide or sexual assault, around that time of the murder that we're looking at or the disappearance that we're looking at. And that's why it's so important that we come together as a community to help build that database. And I would encourage anybody listening, if they're interested in doing case research and helping us build out that database so we can do some of that look up of other crimes and many other things, that they join our community. And you can go to our homepage and click the button that says become a member, and you can learn how to help us add more information to our database.
Yeah, as I know, you have to start somewhere, and you guys started, and have 100 cases. But as you get more information, as people come forward, as people join forces with you guys, that will start to connect dots between cases. It's just a matter of time, because the information that's shared will naturally show who was where and when and all of those things. So yeah, it's really an important point to make that, the site is new. I mean, not, a month old, but more, more time will bring more information. Ashley? Oh, go
Yep.
ahead, Rachel. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Nope, I Ashley can go ahead. I was just going to say, yes, and there are lots of pieces of information out there now that we can get, but it's really that hard desktop research that we need help with. You can pull some details from news articles, but it's then that we come together as a community to really build out things like the timelines and the maps and information like that. So I'll let Ashley wrap up now, though. Sorry.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I'll just reiterate, like it through collective impact is where we can see things really start to move and happen, and how we can provide support and services and manpower, frankly, for people like Allison who are working tirelessly to get cases of their loved ones out in the media, how we can come alongside and utilize our platform and our agency as individuals, but also as a community. Rachel mentioned you can go to our site right now and click become a member. And then part of that is just create a profile, and that will let you follow cases along. So maybe you're not ready to jump in and do research right away, but there's a case that you have really been interested in, you've heard a lot about, or cases, quite frankly, that you haven't, but maybe they're close to your area. You can follow those cases in real time, and we're updating all the time more information. We work in publicly available information, and there's so much of it that is out there, but none of it is connected. So as we're adding into that data model and building out that database, you can see in real time our cases are updated, what's the latest thing that's happened, or what's the latest call to action. So if you have a few minutes, if you've got 5 minutes to share something on social media, great. You know, if you have a couple hours to maybe listen to a podcast or watch a documentary on a case, even better. And if you have a couple months of like, hey, I really want to dive in and do some extra research, or I have this amazing special skill with maps or organization, or I can really Google, like, lend that to these cases also, because again, that will make a huge and incredible impact here. So again, I want to thank you so much, Jennifer, for hosting us. We just appreciate the partnership so much to be able to share cases like this every month. And to be able to bring in people who are working tirelessly like Allison to keep cases of their loved ones out there. And then also highlight people from our community like Dana who are doing this amazing work, have their own platforms, but see that there is an opportunity where we can come together and make a huge impact. And everyone in the audience, thank you so much for listening and being interested in these cases. And I would encourage you to take the next step and utilize your skills to help someone.
Thank you, Ashley. And I definitely want to thank all of you for joining me. And Allison, thank you for sharing your story. Go listen to True Crime PI. Go visit uncovered.com and the Facebook page, Justice for Lonene. And, you know, come back here. We'll be back in a month with Uncovered, but I will be back in 2 weeks with a new unsolved case. And thank you guys for listening. Obviously, without an audience and without everyone on stage, I would be talking to myself. So I definitely appreciate all of you being here and contributing. And I am going to close the room. So everyone have a good night. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you.